Sponsored today's shir sponsored by Frida Farkas commemorating the yahrzeit of her father Nachman ben Yehuda Arya Leib Zichrono Livracha. So we thank you for the sponsorship. May the neshama benefit from the words of Torah that we study today. In addition, it is important for us to remember that today is Remembrance Day. We don't want to mess with Don Cherry, right? So,
mess with who?
But he said he stopped. He's not doing it anymore.
What did Don Cherry say?
But the reality is that we do have, we Jews are all about Hakaras Hatov. We are all about appreciating those that sacrifice so much, and especially when it comes to the Second World War, Canadian soldiers were in essence Moser Nefesh to fight an evil entity, and we remember those, and there are those among our people as well, the hundreds upon hundreds that we remember, and their neshamas should have an aliyah, and the Divrei Torah should benefit the neshamas as well. Parshas Vayeira, you have it? Yeah?
16,000.
Many.
I believe you.
Okay, page 78. Are we ready on page 78? Are you ready for the parsha? So what are we gonna focus on today? You know, Keda, you want me to deal with the most difficult one of all things. So, you know, when we study parsha, there are many things we could do. We have the ability to turn to the text and identify practices of righteous individuals that we try to emulate. We could also identify misdeeds that the Torah wants us to learn what not to do. And obviously this parsha provides a nice amount of that. Here you have an Avraham Avinu, a person recovering from surgery, where you would imagine that he would take his personal time, right? And take a break from his life mission and life journey. This is in the olden days, right? Not when they threw you out of the hospital 24 hours afterwards. These were the days where they kept you there for some time. And nevertheless, Avraham Avinu, his essence, his mission is chesed, but not just the chesed that we talk about to provide food, which is obviously important, but to provide something that's greater than food, meaning in life, right? An understanding of what existence is about. An incredible individual that is not willing to take time for himself, because when he is without those he is able to give to, he feels that life is not life. Inspiring. And then you can read about the complete opposite of the Avraham Avinu, which is the civilization known as the Sdom civilization. Right? The rabbis tell us, Shali Shaliv, Shalach Shalach. I'll take care of myself, you take care of yourself. As a society, we're going to establish rules where we're not going to be, God forbid, giving someone else something that belongs to us. What's mine's mine, right? It's your money, right? It's yours, and don't think at all of the other. Complete opposite, and then the Torah tells us, well, and guess what? When Avraham Avinu hears that civilization is going to come to an end, what does he do? He prays for their welfare. Okay, so it's an incredible message about what life is about, what chesed is about. And these are values that we could take, and that obviously is a lot we can focus on. But I'm going to go ahead and do something which is less desirable, at least for me, and more challenging. And that is when we look at current events, when you look at the world that exists today, you read the news, you watch the news, and you read especially about the land of Israel and the challenges that exist there. Now, currently, over the past few months, we've been focused more on internal issues, right? A dysfunctional government. right? Which again gives credit to the Almighty that He's able to do some incredible things in a country where the government is in essence dysfunctional. Okay, so God is running the show, fine. But when we talk about the bigger picture, right? The issue of the Palestinians, the issue of who exactly owns the land of Israel, the issue of the quote-unquote settlements, right? Or, in one word, what is the Torah attitude towards Ishmael? Right? It's been already many, many centuries that there's an understanding that if you want to understand the Arabs in the land of Israel, you return to the biblical figure of Ishmael. They are in some ways continued descendants of Abraham, right? The idea of welcoming is, believe it or not, part of their culture if you're a part of their tribes, a member of their tribe. And yes, they have some kind of right of existence, but how do we deal with them? There's a fascinating statement that Nachmanides made about 700 years ago, that when you read the mistreatment from Sarah towards Hagar and Ishmael, know very well that we as a nation have paid a price. And the tsaras that we have from Bnei Ishmael, the tsaras that we have from the descendants of Ishmael, the Arabs, is due to the behavior of Sarah. This is what Nachmanides states. And everyone has been challenging Nachmanides for the past 700 years. Are you out of your mind? In other words, are those the only ones that have been difficult to the people of Israel? Was he not familiar already with Christianity? Has Christianity not done far more than what Islam has ever done to the people of Israel? So this is a question that's asked on Nachmanides, and the traditional answer is that when you have tsaras outside of home, that's one thing. When you come home, right, and you expect to have the comfort of your home, and to find someone else there and not allowing you to return, that is a difficulty that is indeed not rational, and that needs an explanation. And that, according to Nachmanides, is something we could go ahead and say Sarah is to blame. But anyway, as what we are taking from the information provided up until now, Ishmael can be the ones we turn to develop an understanding about the Arabs in the land of Israel. And there are many of them, by the way. Right? There are many of them, and it's a very challenging situation. And, thank God, what has been seen as impossible has occurred when the Oslo Accords fell apart, right, which is already some 19 years ago. You would have turned to someone 19 years ago and say, guess what, we'll be okay for the next 19 years. Most people wouldn't have believed it. They would have thought it's the end of the world, right? We brought them there, we welcomed them there, they gave them a little bit of mini state. How are we going to survive? And it seems to be that there's a Kodesh Baruch Hu that's running the show and doing a very good job. But Ishmael and the challenges are still there, and that's what we're going to try to go ahead and do and have a little bit of an understanding where they are coming from and what they are about. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to start on page 94 with the birth of Yitzchak. And one of the key words for this week's parasha is tzachak. There's a lot of tzachak here. And in Judaism, there's good tzachak and bad tzachak. Tzachak is to laugh. Right? There's good things to laugh at. Sometimes laughter is good. Laughter is the best medicine. Right? That's what they say, and it is true. We love sharing the story of the Talmud, that Eliyahu Hanavi is in the marketplace, and there were many people there, and one of the rabbis was able to communicate with Eliyahu Hanavi, and then he asked him, who among all those present here are the ones that are going to merit the world to come more than anyone else? Right? Who are the greatest? And Eliyahu Hanavi points to two individuals who were known for sharing jokes. Clean jokes, okay, but jokes. Two jokers. Right? I always envisioned it when I was a kid. There was a program called The Muppets, and you had the two fellows who was a Waldorf and like the two individuals who would share the joke. Those were the individuals that get Olam Haba. Why do they get Olam Haba? So Eliyahu Hanavi clarified, when people are going through difficulty, when people are having a hard day, when people are suffering, they see it as their mission to go ahead and uplift the spirits. You uplift the spirits, right? That's what you are about. That's what you think about. That's where you put you place your creativity. Those are the ones that indeed merit olam haba. When we think about others and use whatever tools we have, right? Sometimes the tools we are given are financial tools to assist others. Sometimes it's time, and sometimes it's words. And words, right? We're very fascinating creatures, we humans, right? Words have an impact on us, right? For some odd reason, when some fool insults you, right, you take it to heart. No logical reason for doing that. But there's a good side to it as well, that if you have the ability to say a nice thing to someone, and it could be at the right time, it's magnificent. It's really magnificent what we could do. So to tzachak, to laugh at things, and to help people laugh at things, laughter is incredible. That's good laughter, and there's a lot of good laughter in the parasha. Avraham, when he hears about the birth, it's a laughter, right? It's a happiness. It's an expression of happiness. Sarah gets there as well. But then there's some bad sachak. Bad sachak in our tradition, right, are late night comics, right? Especially the more modern days. The Yeridas Hadoras, the Post, Johnny Carson, and Leno. Those were people that the people that just mock everything. Everything's a joke. The government's a joke. At times they're right, but everything, to laugh at everyone. Someone makes a mistake, right? There was many years ago. There was a situation in Atlanta during the Olympics. During the Olympics, 96, right? 1996 was the Olympics in Atlanta.
Yeah, for sure.
You go to Atlanta, they have Olympic Park, and it's a nice. So you see it there. So there's a story of a fellow that there was a bomb there, and there was a fellow, a security guard, not exactly the brightest of individuals, but he was a security guard. Found the bomb, got the word out, but for whatever reason, the media decided that it's very logical to believe that he placed the bomb there to get the attention. And he fit the profile of someone that would do that. And who made the galechta, who made the big joke out of him? The late night, right? Now they destroyed the individual, and then they found that it wasn't him, right? But laughing, you could destroy a person. In our tradition, there is a group of people that we are told that they should have no expectation to make the Gan Eden. Okay, no expectation at all. They're going to they're taking the other path, to the other place, and that's Katlet Sanim, we call them. Right, our people that are late Sanim, that everything's a joke. So when someone comes in, right, and gives us a talk about valuing good things, about valuing our tradition, about the importance of education, of the importance of doing something where we should be more aware about with what we talk about. That Lashon Hara is something we should be aware of. And there is someone in the back of the room that is making a big joke out of it. Welcome to your Katlet Sanim. Okay? So laughter is the greatest of things, but tzachak, this week's parsha tells us, and this is a parsha about Jewish continuity, right? There's an itzchak, the continuity not just of the Jewish people, but continuity of values in the world. And Avram Avinu, by the way, before, when Almighty decides to communicate with him about what he's planning to do to Sodom, he mentions the fact that this fellow Abraham is one that his whole life is about values, and he wants to be sure that these values live on, and he's going to teach his children about these values. You want to talk about continuity, you have to address and note the difference between good laughs, and laughs are good. A sense of humor is very, very important, right? But then there's the bad laughs. So this is what we are told. And with that, we can understand what's happening a little bit here. To an extent, page 94, chapter 21, and we have a Mazel Tov here. Sarah gave birth to Yitzchak. Okay? Now, in verse 3, it's the naming. It's the naming. And if I would ask you in one verse, you have to tell me that Abraham called the child Yitzchak. Okay, how many words would you need to get that message across? Abraham named him Yitzchak. Right? You got 5?
5.
Okay, Balkora, go ahead, give me the 5 words.
Vayikra Avraham
Without
Shem-
looking.
Vayikra Avraham Shem Beno Yitzchak.
Excellent. I think we got the message. Vayikra Avram Shem Beno Yitzchak. Okay. Now, verse 3. Let's actually read it. Vayikra Avram. You see it? Et Shem Bno HaNolad Lo. Aha, the son that was born to him. Asher Yalda Lo Sarah. Just in case you forgot from the previous verse what happened, don't worry about it. Yitzchak. What's going on here? Why extend it? Okay, that's number one. Now, in the later verses, there's some good tzchok here. Verse 6, in verse 6 you see Sarad tzchok asali Elokim. This is magnificent. Vayigdal hayeled, and then move on to verse 8. Okay, he grew, and it seems to be that when he finished nursing, it was a time for a celebration, especially for the mother probably, right? Vayigdal hayeled, vayigamal. And tradition was, Vayas Avram Mishte Gadol. Okay, there was a tremendous feast. Fine. So far so good. We'll get to that verse. But now in verse 9, welcome to trouble. In other words, this is the first time we're introduced to Yitzchak no longer as a baby, he's already a child, starting to learn a little bit about the world. And in verse 9, Vatere Sarah. What does Sarah notice? The son of Hagar, the Egyptian, with Egyptian values. And she sees that child, and not just an average child, the one that Abraham, we know him as Ishmael. And what is he doing at the end of verse 9? Mitzachek. Mitzachek. He's mocking. So he got to be sent away, and he's sent away, and the rest of the story you are familiar with. But what exactly was he mocking? What was he mocking? Okay, so this is a question that we're going to go ahead and deal with. So what we have to remember so far, number one, to explain verse 3, why the Torah has to really spell it out, that this was the child, not just that Avram was the father, but rather at Shem Beno HaNolad Lo. The Torah has to tell us, Yaldalo Sarai, why use so many words to get a message across? And then we're going to try to figure out what exactly is this mitzachek. So those are the two questions we're going to have to get back to. Okay? Beforehand, we're going to have to turn again to chapter 20, which is page 90. Okay, and that will assist us in clarifying what's happening there. We're going to be introduced to a fellow by the name of Avimelech. Avimelech was known as the king of the Plishtim. So we are told here, Vayisa Avraham Artza HaNegem. You have to realize that he's in the Hebron area, not far from where Sodom once upon a time was. And after these massive and significant events and the end of that city and that civilization, he leaves. It's very, very possible that a person that wants to have an impact and that he wants to go ahead and teach the values of kindness wanted to be not so far from Sodom. People traveling towards Sodom could go ahead, or people leaving Sodom perhaps can interact with Abraham and learn those values and those messages. There's no Sodom, so what happens? You move on to the next area. And here he makes his way and he travels to the south and he settles in between Kadesh and Shur. Kadesh and Shur, and specifically he lives in the city of Gerar. Okay? These names symbolize something. Remember what they symbolize? The idea of in Judaism, we talk about Kedusha, sanctity. And sanctity is our essence. Sanctity is not a complete detachment from this world, but rather an understanding that everything in the world, when it's used properly, that sanctifies it. You take grapes, you take wine. Wine has always been called the dangerous tool, right? The dangerous beverage that could detach a person from his mission and existence. While in Judaism, when used correctly, right? When used correctly, it's kiddush. Fine, that's kedusha. What is the shur? We'll get to that soon. So what happens is he interacts with Avimelech, And Avimelech, as occurs in other locations, takes the wife. Avimelech is punished for it. And then, in verse 11 on page 92, while Avimelech says to him, this is absurd. If we're dealing here with your wife, communicate. Don't you believe in communication? Right? What is it with you men? Get the message across. Why are you concealing it? And Avraham responds in verses 11, Vayomer Avraham ki amarti. You know what I said to myself when I saw your society, Avimelech? When I saw your tribe? It could be a small group of people at the time, by the way. But what I noticed was, keywords, rak en yirat elokim b'makom hazeh. You know what you're lacking? The fear of God. So it appears, and this is what many commentators know, that Avimelech was no Egyptian. He was no Sdomite. This is a person that believed in some kind of social order. That things should be pleasant. When you interact with another person, it should be pleasant. You should be willing to give, because then in turn he's going to give you. And therefore there was indeed a system, a rational system of ethics. That's what they lived by. And what's quite fascinating is that we're talking about the Philistines. Who are the Philistines? Who are the Philistines? The word Plishtim comes from the word palashet, polesh. What is a polesh, even in modern Hebrew? Invaders, right? Palash, is it used in modern Hebrew? I think so. Invaders. These were a group of invaders, and it appears, they found this in documents from Egypt, that they were known as the Sea People. And the Philistines they're not one of the 7 nations, descendants of Canaan or descendants of Ham that were there, not the Aboriginals, but rather they made their way there, and there is a theory that has been strengthened over and over again, that they came from Greek islands. They came from the Aegean civilization. Those were the Philistines. And the way it has been strengthened is, number one, through DNA. There were 5 cities of the Philistines. The Philistines, this is really the beginning of their kingdom. And it could very well be that Avimelech was the father of whatever type of kingdom they created there. The father of that kingdom. Avi Melech, of this civilization. This civilization developed later on, and it grew, and it turned into 5 cities. These 5 Philistine cities, Gat, Aza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, right? Those cities that were on the coast became quite significant. If you study Tanakh, you know very well that we had to deal with them over and over again. And eventually you have the Goliath. But when the DNA of whatever remains they found there are linked back to those cultures that originated in the Greek islands. And when it comes to the pottery, for example, that they found in those regions, you could go to museums in Israel, you could see this. It's not something that's unknown, right? There are articles in Smithsonian, but the pottery basically comes with the same style and the same way of thinking as a result from the Greek islands. Now, when you talk about Greece and you talk about a civilization, what do you think of? The beginning of philosophy, the beginning of Western culture. You think of the beginning of this concept that humans, through logic, could develop a system of righteousness, right? That I can do what's right. I will not do something, or I should not allow to be doing something that if everyone does, it will become problematic. In other words, why do I not take property from you? Because if I take property from you, you'll take property from me, and as a result of that, no one will be able to really leave. So therefore, let's establish a system that I'm going to respect your property, right? It's not because we believe that there is something from God above that wants us to do it. It's not because we believe that there's sanctity in existence, but rather, practically speaking, we want to survive. So this is something that is appealing, right? And it's nice too. It is nice when you know that I can leave my bike on the front yard and no one's going to go ahead and take it. And it's nice when we have, ways of greeting people and saying hello in a pleasant way. It is something that visually is nice. It is external. but not more than that. So with that, we can understand a few things. Number one, we can understand that Vayisa, back to the location. Where does he settle? Avraham Avinu is now interacting where there's going to be a contrast between that which is holy and that which is visually pleasant. The word in Hebrew, throughout Tanakh, the word shur is vision. Ashureno velo merachok. In other words, by Balak, the word shur means vision, visual. And what we are being introduced to here is the idea that Avraham Avinu is going to begin the process of really teaching us the difference between what is holy and what is just visually nice.
Externally.
Something that is very, very external. And what Avraham Avinu is telling them, that if your values is only based on what is external, what looks nice and what looks present, but you are lacking the fear of God, if there is no God, everything is going to collapse. And that's what he tells them in verse 11. Avimelech walks over to him and says, like, you treated me like an Egyptian? Well, you thought that, I'm an Egyptian? To go ahead and state that your wife is a sister, that works well if you interact with one of those societies. But I'm a European. I'm a European. I come from the Greek islands. I have values. And Avraham Avinu responds, Rak en yirat Elokim b'makom hazeh. You don't fear God? I'm sorry, nothing will be long-lasting here. Okay? This is what's taking place. There's a fascinating insight that years later, when we talk about this civilization, and we talk about the fact that this is really the beginning of Western culture, right? The beginning of, really the roots of rational thinking. So there's a fascinating statement that the Sforno makes, analyzing this verse by bringing in the story of Goliath. What do you know with Goliath? When Goliath went ahead and began this attack towards the people of Israel, so Goliath declares, right? David, of course, comes and saves the day, but beforehand, Goliath declares, Anochi Plishti. In other words, I'm significant, right? I'm a Plishti. Ve'atem, but you Jews, Avadim l'Shaul. You guys are slaves to your king. Okay, so Sforno understands that to mean that among the Plishtim, generals, members of that society had rights, and as a result of their rights, it was a weaker government. It was a weaker government. And therefore, the Plishti could get up and say, you know what, we're a strong society, because people are treated with respect. Anochi Plishti, right? I have a right to vote, a right to say what I want, a right to carry arms. I have that right. You Jews, on the other hand, are a much weaker society, because how do you view every single soldier? Just as a slave to the king. This is what he notes. And as a result of that, he reads into our verse, Rak en yirat Elokim, in a very, very different way. We have names, we have terms used to define God. If we use them as a way of describing the Creator, we have the sensitivity not to utter it as it's written. In other words, Hashem tzvakot, right? What does the word tzvakot mean exactly? Well, legions, a tzava, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge of all powers. It's really saying that He is in charge of everything that's occurring. Now, the word tzvaot on its own is not a word that is talking about God. If I'm talking about different armies that get together for some maneuvers, I could say that's tzvaot shel kama medinot, right? So too, by the way, the word Elokim, it's not really defined. It's not one of the Shem. It's not a Shem Hashem. What does Elokim mean? The one who has power, the one who has mightiness. If you are talking about God, we have the tradition of not uttering it as is, but we say Elokim. But if you are talking, for example, about judges who actually have power, you could say that Elohim bekerev, Elohim yishpot. In other words, there are judges that have power. So comes Sforno, and he says the following: Rak en yirat Elohim b'makom hazeh. In other words, the Elohim mentioned here is not God, but it's rather authority. And what Avraham Avinu is communicating with Avimelech is that the way you run your government here, that you give rights to people, right, and you let them have their opinion. In such a society, I cannot trust you. In other words, ein mora malchut. People don't fear their government, and they don't fear you. So therefore, I had to protect my wife, because the reality is that among the Philistines, the leaders were not really like kings, but rather every person had his own rights, and he proves it from Goliath. He proves it from Goliath, who had the ability to say, I'm not like you people who are slaves. I am someone of significance. So when we walk away from here up until this point, what we need to remember is that the issues of chapter 20 are basically Avram Avinu confronting a society that has some system of values, but they're Western, right? They are originating from a society that's thinking, that brings about in the future philosophers and rational thinking. That is what he is confronting in chapter 20. And with it, we could go back to chapter 21 and have a little bit of an appreciation of what's taking place here. Now, Sarah was taken by Avimelech, right, for some time. Eventually, she is returned. And right afterwards, she is expecting. Okay? Tune in to late night shows at 11:30. Okay? And what do you think they're saying? At late night, 3,400 years ago. Right? Who's the father?
I don't know.
Huh? What was the claim? What was the common joke at that time? Yep, Avimelech. And by the way, according to many commentators, like the Netziv, this is something that Avraham Avinu, with all his sorrows, has to deal with as well. Right? And when they would come and wish him a mazel tov, there was a wink wink. Right? And there were jokes. And at the parties that he was making, right, he had to invite some people. After all, he was a leader. And he had to invite some people that perhaps, politically would be beneficial to have them. But in the back rows, as he was talking there and giving his shmooze about Kodesh Baruch Hu, what a madness, I'm 100 years old, there were for sure people in the back saying, yeah, sure, right? And people would look at the baby and say, boy, why does he remind me so much of Avimelech, right? This is what was happening. So Avraham Avinu in verse 3 has to make it very clear, and the Torah has to make it very clear that's not the case. Don't tune in to the late night shows on page 94, verse 3, but rather, Vaikra Avraham, not et Bno Yitzchak, et Shem Bino Hanolad Lo. The Torah testifies. The Torah testifies. Shem Bino Hanolad Lo. Asher Yalda Lo Sarah. Yep. It was Avram Avinu. No, don't walk away with any questions, okay? Yitzchak. Netziv adds that the big party that is taking place in verse 8 is to get the word out. This is my son. Okay, this is the issue that's happening. Now, the Rashi that you're referring to is in the beginning of Parashat Toldot, when the Torah tells us, Ele Toldot Yitzchak ben Avram, Avraham olidat Yitzchak. And again, the Torah, for some reason, has to make it clear. So, Rashi tells us that there were Leitzanei Hador Omrim Avimelech Nitabra Sarah. It was a massive movement. This was not just a few individuals. This was a major problem. Yitzchak, he is not Abraham's. It's Yitzchak ben Avimelech. That was the issue.
Fake news.
Fake news. Okay, that's what we have. Now, with that, but it's the comics. That's after it's Litzanim. Those who want to mock, and when you mock things that are incredible. In other words, I have this issue that when someone tells me this incredible story that happened, this nest, this Rebbe, I'm a skeptic. It's a problem. It's a problem I have. I don't believe things that, because if the one testifying is someone that I could trust and he hears it firsthand, I go with it. if it's in my tradition. I've been trained well, Baruch Hashem, that I believe everything that's in Torah. But when someone shares with me some maisa about some Rebbe that gave a bracha on the next day and everything, I don't know, it's the burden of proof is upon them. Now that's a sad practice in some ways, because there are things that should inspire us. So Baruch Hashem, I'm inspired by nature. In other words, I see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in every tree, right? It's a little bit difficult in the winter, but I see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in nature. I see him in birds, I see him in trees, I see him in flowers, I see him in food, right? I see him, so even if the maisela is above a maisa, it doesn't make a difference, because the banana is a reality. And the brilliance in the banana, and the brilliance in the trees, and the brilliance in the fact that these pine trees, right, have like antifreeze in every single needle, and as a result of that they withstand the winter, but due to the fact that they withstand the winter, they're going to have to carry the snow. So if it would be a regular tree, it would collapse. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes the tree grow straight so it could withstand the burden of the snow. That's a creator. That indicates HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I don't need it, right? But someone that walks around and mocks everything, right? You have a problem, because you're not going to be inspired, and all of existence is to be inspired. Every single day, and ideally every moment, we have to think about this is an incredible world. It's a complex one, because you have to deal with humans, and the worst human you have to interact with is yourself, because we know all our complexities, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that way. But being inspired is important. Mocking everything, right? Late night is terrible. Late night is, they're terrible. They're funny once in a while, not always. But they mock everything. And they've had this wonderful supply of things to laugh at over the past 2-3 years in Washington, no question about it. And also in Ottawa, right, with all due respect, a little bit. He's done his share, right? But mitzachek is bad. Mitzachek is bad. And now in verse 9, now that we know the background of Avimelech and his civilization, and we know what the good jokes were, what was being discussed after the birth, Vateres Sarah, et ben Hagara Mitzrit, where there was no question there, who was Ishmael's father? No question there. Asher Yalda LaAvraham. What was he doing? And the verse 9, Mitzachek. What was he mitzachek? Note commentators, among them Sforno and many of them, he was sharing the jokes. Meaning, how did Yishmael look at Yitzchak? He looked at him as an outsider. He's not Abraham's son. He is a descendant of Avimelech. He's an outsider. He doesn't belong here. This land is not going to be given to him. We are the descendants of Avraham, Ishmael says. This one, well, he was sharing the joke. Me'avimelech nitabra Sarah. So this is the joke. And obviously we understand very well why Sarah says, Garesh ha'amazot vetbnag. Get him out of here. Right? We can't have him saying such things. He does not belong here, because the reality is, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by the way, makes it very, very clear, Ki be'Yitzchak yikareh lechazera. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says it's Yitzchak. We are the continuity. But back to what we talked about a little bit, about this idea of looking to Torah to have an understanding of what's happening today. I think that in some ways, in the 20th century, we see a little bit of this mitzachek. We see a little bit about this claim that the descendants of Yitzchak and their claim to Israel is absurd, because we are basically children of Western civilization. If you do ever sit down and read any academic work from left-wing Palestinians, right, and what they talk about when it comes to modern Zionism, they don't see it as a return of a people to their ancient land that they've been praying for centuries. What do they see it as? It is just the continuity of European imperialism. In other words, Europe, right, and the child of Europe, which is basically the United States, they want to go ahead and conquer nations that are, that are less developed, like India, right? Like Pakistan, like Congo, like West Africa, like South Africa, with all due respect, right? In other words, we're going to go into these civilizations where we will find primitive people, and we're going to teach them culture. So we're going to go to India, and what are we going to do in India? We're going to find a few people that indeed could understand. Among the Indians, they have some Chosheва ones, right? If your last name is Gupta. I remember I've told you this, right? That I interacted in university in Memphis with a fellow, and he tells me that my family originated in India, and I'm a Gupta, by the way. So I had no idea. I'm a Milevsky. Like, what is that? But then I understood that in those societies, it's a Gupta, it's like, oh, I'm a Soloveitchik. In other words, it was a last name that meant something among those things. So what happens is there's an understanding that European, and with imperialism, they're going to go ahead, take over nations because the locals have no right to exist. And therefore, the way these Palestinian academics view the presence or the return of Jews to Eretz Israel, they basically see it just as a continuation of such practices. That Jews, who are Europeans in essence, were Europeans. The whole idea of returning, it has nothing to do with the Bible, it has nothing to do with tradition. Some of them even state these are not people that were interested in tradition, but rather they're Europeans that want to take the land away from those who actually belong there. Right? Where does this come from? In other words, where in Torah do we find this idea? Right here, the mitzachek. The mitzachek is this idea. The idea of just as Ishmael says Yitzchak, he's not the son of Abraham. You know what Yitzchak is? Yitzchak is the son of Avimelech. If he wants to have his homeland, he's more than welcome to go back to the Greek islands, right? You know, there's a wonderful Aegean civilization that's developing there. Let them go back to where they came from. Remember Helen Thomas, by the way? I don't know if you remember. She was an old-time correspondent. I met her once. She was very friendly, very interesting. Helen Thomas, she was a correspondent in the White House for decades upon decades, until I think she died before she left the White House, because sometimes you would see her there just sitting there. And so she was there forever, right? So Helen Thomas eventually, and there was always no end that she was left-leaning, until eventually, you know how it is, you get a little bit older and you say what you want, right? And here she said what she wanted. What did she want? Israeli, Jews don't belong in Israel. Let them go back to where they belong, to Poland. Go back to Poland, right? We're treated well there after all, right? Go back to Germany. Like, what are they doing? So this is a major problem because the left, deep down in the United States of America more than anywhere else, and obviously in Europe too nowadays, but the left, what does the left believe? Jews don't belong there. Yitzchak, they don't belong in Israel. They're not really the ones that belong there. They are basically declaring Me'avimelech nitabra Sarah. That's what they're declaring. That we are part of Western civilization, and that's where we belong. It's our problem that they put us in the crematorium. Shouldn't be the problem of the Palestinians. That's the attitude that exists. And what's fascinating is that here you have south of the border nowadays in elections, and these left, the extreme left is making its appearance with comfort, right? The only one from the old type of Democrats is an old Democrat by the name of Joe Biden, who's ever bottled already came out. In other words, but he was always friendly to Israel. He's like right. He was always good. He deep down a supporter of it, no question about that, because he's the old Democrat. But when you come to the new generation, or those that are affected by the new generation, they're old too, but their way of thinking is modern. Deep down, they don't believe that Jews have a right. And that's the challenge that we face. But obviously, I think it's always a calling for the Jew to inspire all Jews that if we want to go ahead and link ourselves to Abraham, we have to act like Abraham, right? There's the chesed that we have to do. Connecting to our tradition, connecting to the values. Perhaps if we take the values of Abraham, the world will recognize that we are indeed descendants of Abraham. So that's a little bit of a message of the Parsha. It is 11 o'clock now. We do remember those who gave their life. Remembrance Day, November 11, 2019. And all Neshama Shel Avnei. And thank you again to our sponsors. And everyone have a wonderful day.
Go ahead.